Welcome back to another episode of the History of Fan Anime. I'm your host, Chow, and today's episode is another exciting episode where I get to go back into the past and look at the pictures. Today's topic is going to be San Diego Comic Con 2004. Okay, now I've just recently met up with one of my friends that were on the trip, and we discussed some of the things and some of the memories that we had on that in that trip. And so I wasn't not going to be able to use too much of the audio that was used in the hub because just we were in a restaurant and I was just using it to sort of take notes and that kind of stuff and physical reminders of stuff. So can't use too much of that for the interview or anything like that. But it gives me an indication. I did remember that we did trade our cameras and all the different pictures and that stuff that was in the cameras, so that we're able to do some of that. So I'll show you some of that kind of stuff and in this particular video. All right. So again, before we begin, don't forget to go down below, click and click subscribe. Um, but about 60% of you are already subscribed, and I really appreciate that. And again, hopefully the rest of you, I hope I've earned your subscription, and you go hit that red button, subscribe, and also maybe click that notification bell because obviously YouTube is starting to get better on recommending my videos now. But for the mass majority, you won't know when I release videos until you get that notification ring. All right, so go ahead and do that. Anyway, so the year is 2004, and this is one of the times that we got to go down to San Diego for a trip down to the Comic Con, and this year, I kind of I knew I had from the previous year bought the tickets to go to San Diego Comic Con, so I definitely from 2003. I definitely knew that I wanted to come back for 2004. Now I knew that it was going to be sort of a last moment. I didn't have the right same people that was going around, and and so we decided, oh, look, let's grab gather some friends, and then just sort of we'll go down together, okay? And so anyway, I got some pictures and I got a little bit of audio, and I'll go over some of the stories that will go there, and and I'll explain some of them as that. And I think there's probably enough for a couple episodes here of some of the material that I got. So yeah, we'll go back a little in the past and see what it was like to go to San Diego Comic Con during the height of anime. The anime boom, shall we say? All right.
A lot of people, car culture is really crazy to explain. This is just my experience. Cultural influences between the East and the West, and Vancouver is just kind of like a mash of both, and Initial D is also kind of like a mash of both. And I'll kind of explain my thoughts on this. So when I was in high school, my Honger friends had nice cars, like BMWs, yep, like souped up Civics and everything. And I was stuck driving my mom's old beater Civic and everything like that. I know that on the West Side, the West Side schools, the kids had really nice cars, like Supras and everything like that. Super sweet cars. Here, the car culture in Vancouver back in the mid 90s was pretty subtle. We had some tuner places in Richmond, and it was really expensive to get stuff from there. So a lot of the only the Honger kids had connections to these Richmond shops and everything.
Okay, so even though this is his personal account, I'd have to concur that this is also probably my account too, and many other people's same sort of account. Basically, when I was going to university, and that's on the West End, yeah, there was definitely those people that were fobs. In this case, they're from Hong Kong. So again, these are at the time where these people, business people, and whatnot, and people that have affluence and money and things like that in Hong Kong realize that, hey, they're going to get handed back to China, And heaven forbid that China is going to turn it into a dystopian police state. But just in case, they want to make sure that they have an escape route. So one of the easiest ways to do it is to send their kids overseas as international students. And one of the easiest places to be is obviously in Canada, since Hong Kong is a British colony, and the same was what Canada was. So passports are really easy, and that kind of stuff is really easy to do. So during the 90s, and basically during this sort of anime era that I got started into, all these hongers, these fobs, started coming in. And of course, here I'm going to school. In my case, I didn't even have a car. I just rode on transit all the time. But sure enough, there's these kids that that were definitely in a lot of my classes and that kind of stuff, and they were the type that didn't give a crap about their grades and that kind of stuff, because they're paying triple the student fee, right? The student and the price for tuition, but they didn't get crap because it's all the parents' money. They drove like the newest cars, nicest names, BMW, Lexus, all these really nice. And even if it was like Honda or whatnot, it'd be the nicest ones, right? And and they decked them out with like $10,000 stereos with the big boom, ass kicker tubes and that kind of stuff, and double lined amp, with the extra power and all that other stuff, and they just decked it up because they didn't care, right? It was all to quote, the parents' money, right? So they got a house, so they didn't have to worry about renting anything. So because again, that's another way to secure their escape route out of Hong Kong, in case if they had the forethought that something bad was going to happen, who knew? And they'd have their escape route and their housing and that kind of stuff taken care of when they landed in Vancouver, right? So so these kids, they don't have to do anything, right? And so again, being just the poor old student here, I always admired these guys, right? Because here they are, they bring the Hong Kong culture, which included anime, which included all that Eurobeat music, and that kind of higher lifestyle. Being Asian myself, I was able to befriend a few of those guys, but it requires a different level of sort of you got to hold yourself to a different sort of level, because they want to do and buy expensive stuff. They want to go to the best restaurants and try different stuff out, and all these dessert places, and these sort of fancy sort of coffee shops. It's not even things like Starbucks wasn't enough, right? You had to go to these even more expensive places and pay $10 for like a slice of tiny pie, a cake or something like that, or whatever, in Richmond, and Robson Street, which is our sort of more expensive retail store street, like if you think Los Angeles would be like Rodeo Road or something like that, right? It's going to places like that, right? It's not. It won't be acceptable to go to McDonald's or Starbucks or anything like that. No. You got to go to these more expensive places. So, it was tough to hang with these guys sometimes, but definitely I wanted to, because I said at that time they were one of the only people that had anime. So, so this blends in a little bit with fob culture and I said car culture in this case.
Car culture got kind of weird because the West influenced the East, and after influenced back the West. What I mean by that is that, like, when before, actually really similar to the time that Initial D came out, Fast and Furious came out. So Fast and Furious was like so big in car culture, but I felt it didn't really represent us as well as it should have, because like cars were like super gaudy, had like stickers everywhere, and it was like really loud and crazy. Whereas the Japanese styling,
it's more like the NASCAR
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Right? We
pass through the
Yeah.
car with advertising.
Yeah. So it was crazy because like Japanese styling back then didn't have all those like stickers and crazy stuff. But that in turn from Fast and Furious influenced Japanese car scene and car tuning, and then they became all crazy and stuff with like when like drifting started becoming more like popular and everything. Because back then, drag racing in North America was much more popular. Not many people knew of what like drifting like really was. So Japan like kind of had that, and like in the magazines, I'd be like reading magazines every single like month as well too, along with like video game magazines. So they'd be talking about like drifting and like these drift teams in Japan, and like some of them would be like going to Hawaii and having drift shows and everything like that, kind of like demonstrations and stuff. We didn't really have many big car shows here that specialized in like Japanese car culture. We had like a couple of them, like Boom in 1998 and 97, everything like that. Kind of like showcased that, but this is like before. This is before Fast and Furious, I believe. So Fast and Furious afterwards like made car culture more prevalent, but also had like a lot of like negatives alongside with that, because it was more so about like winning rather than just like becoming like better and everything like that. How Initial D kind of came about was that like I think I heard of it from online forums. Then I asked you for it. I don't. Did you watch it at the time, or did you just have it?
Okay, the reason why I got really into the Initial D.
Yeah.
Now, again, at the time, I was really involved in the European music.
Yeah.
So I was really into that. So and anything that really came out was from AVEX.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I was
Even.
a really big
Yeah.
fan of anything that came out from AVEX tracks. So when I found this anime and started watching it, okay, one of the biggest turnoffs actually was the character design.
Oh.
Like as compared to most animes, it actually has the worst female character design. Like they were literally ugly.
Yeah, they're not pretty.
Yeah. Well, so ugly that the guys and the girls look exactly the same.
Yeah,
like
the artists, yeah.
Drawn,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So
So it was really kind of a turnoff. But what really pulled me in was the fact that the music in it was really well, it was really well synced and positioned in the show. Okay? It was very, very appropriate for the show, right? And like most shows like of that kind of nature, one episode made me have to watch the next to find out the result.
Yeah.
How is Takumi gonna beat this guy?
Yeah.
And the next guy or whatever. And it's the exact same formula that they use for Slam Dunk and and shows like that. Okay. CNC is another one. Like, how is they gonna beat the next guy or move on, right? And so I got really interested in this kind of this anime, and I really wanted to find out the entire series, and I started getting really into different things from it. Now, I'm not a huge car guy, right? Like I don't know very much about the way the cars are and that kind of stuff. But that didn't stop me from again trying to still hang out with the fobs and that kind of stuff who do have the nicer cars and that kind of stuff. I can appreciate obviously the amount of effort and fine tuned the detail that these guys have, and they exuded lots of money. Obviously, everything's handed to them. Like that's what the fobs were, right? But yeah, I mean, I still do have to thank a lot of the Bob friends who I hung out with from getting lots of various different animes, music, all that stuff that was, I knew that was in part of, from Hong Kong culture, that kind of stuff. But it's a different style than what I the traditional stuff that I would that you get from your parents or whatever. It was sort of like the new generation of their
I, I think what was really appealing about Initial D was that, like, first and foremost, it had like cars that we as car enthusiasts really wanted to have, like the RX-7, the Skyline GTR and everything like that. These were the cars that we wished to have, like we aspired to have, like they were like kind of like our dream cars, so to speak, like to like kind of save up for them, and like the characters had them, and then like we the story about like Takumi and just like drifting in general, it was something that was so like cool because like back then we didn't know what drifting really was. Like, the culture wasn't really there. It was just like drag racing, like just only like drag racing.
It's interesting you mentioned that because here, like when I think Western car culture, right? Sure, the thing that usually predominates in most people's minds are like, okay, so you get the muscle cars, right? The Mustangs and other stuff. And then, of course, the one step up above that would be those, the more elite kind of cars.
Yeah, like
the
Corvette,
the GTRs and that sort of stuff. And then, of course, then right above that would be all the luxury vehicles.
Yeah.
Aston Martins or whatever you want to, like at the very top, right? But to an everyday person, those are literally out of.
Oh yeah, they're out of the question.
I mean, sure, there may be a dream car, but even something like the GTR or Ferrari, any of the Ferraris or whatever, for most people, those would be like beyond,
well beyond,
car,
yeah.
Right? Whereas, you're right, something like the Sylvia or
the RX-7, like 240, like and those things.
Like, okay, that's actually
like attainable, back then, like the prices were like reasonable. So then that part was really like appealing to me, and the other aspect was like, you see Takumi's evolution as like a character, and I think his best friend Itsuki like is always kind of like encouraging him to become like better, because I think what I kind of related with was that, like, Takumi is not a character that I normally relate with. I don't really relate to him compared to other characters. However, one thing that I did appreciate is that, like, he is open-minded to like learning. He was really open-minded to like learning about like car culture and getting good at it and getting good at driving, instead of seeing it just being like something as a chore, because that's what he was doing. He was essentially he was delivering tofu at night, and he just wanted to go home as quickly as possible to sleep and everything like that. So he was like driving quickly because he wanted to get home, because he didn't like driving. I think that as the story progresses, he becomes passionate about having a dream. I think like when we're younger, especially when we're going through the transitional phase of like high school to university, you don't know what you want to do. Like I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do. I wanted to have a background in science, but I didn't know what sort of career that I really like wanted. I think that kind of spoke to me in the sense of like, it's kind of like their life stage too. They're going through high school to college as well. So they didn't know what the hell they were gonna really do like either. Like Takumi for sure didn't know what to do. So I think that we were able to relate to that better than like Fast and Furious and everything like that. So that's like one thing that I really like. One thing that speaks to me, this is on a very personal level, like Initial D for me, racing is one thing. Racing is important in the sense that, like, it's something that I think is cool, is passionate about. But the other thing is the development of friendships and how the growth of a character and seasonal change. One thing that Initial D for me uh, that I think portrays so well, it goes through all 4 seasons of um, of the characters' lives. It goes to springtime, summertime, autumn time,
Okay, yeah.
and winter time. And almost every Christmas I watch Initial D Third Stage. It's my Christmas movie because it's like winter and they celebrate Christmas in that movie. And you know, this kind of like it's kind of something that I view with like rose tinted glasses in the sense that like I view Initial D as progressing through the seasons of life, like figuratively and also like within the characters like actuality. They have to deal with the pressures of racing in the summer where it's like really hot in Japan. In the fall, like they have autumn races where like slippery leaves are like definitely a problem. And then third stage in the winter where like there's like no grip, there's like snow everywhere. So not only does the seasons matter in the racing, but it also matters in the life stage that you're kind of going through as they're getting through graduation, they're getting through like their life, and they're deciding on, am I gonna work? Am I gonna go to college? What are you getting on your exams and everything? So that's kind of both reasons why Initial D is kind of like a very important anime in my life. I can honestly say that it's Initial D is at the same level of importance as Street Fighter and Dragon Ball for me, in the sense that like it really speaks to me about like progressing through life stage with friends. Yeah.
Okay, so Vincent mentions that the fact that one of the things that talks about how progressing through transitions in life, especially when you're going through school and that kind of stuff, and I go to also realize that another one of the big draws for me for Initial D, and I've already told you many times in the various episodes that one of the things I always loved was the fact that I'm really attracted to like high school type stories. And the reason why is because I still feel that going to high school, even with all the the discrimination and that kind of stuff, and some of the bullying that happened, I still find that is one of the most sort of carefree and sort of I've got a lot of my best memories from that period of time. And so when I watch high school shows like Degrassi Jr. or Northwood and things like that, when they put out an episode about, let's say, like drugs or like a prostitution or something like that, right? I can think back to the people that are in my school and that kind of stuff, and I and there would be that person, right? And they'd play the story out, and then it's like that I can see that exactly happening, right? And so when I think back to the days when I was in high school, and I'm thinking about cars and that kind of stuff, obviously they weren't performance cars, but I mean if you were the high school kid that just turned 16 and you got your license, like you were the king, right? You were the guy that could get the chicks, because you could pick the chicks up and you can drive them out, and you had all these friends that that would hang out with you, because even if it was the beat up most of it. I remember my friend Ron, who got his parents' car after he that, and his car was like I said, it was so bad, like the on the back seat, behind the driver, okay, the floorboard was so rusted through that if you looked carefully, you can see the road, passing underneath you. As the car drove, so like you can literally do the Fred Flintstone thing with that car, like literally. I mean, it's just a theoretical example, but yeah, if you sat behind the driver's seat, you had to be really careful not to put your foot through the through the thing, but that was one of the things. But
still, it was still cool, right? Like, you had the car. You were like, one of the people that had the ability to drive around, or you want to go out at night or whatever to go do the movies or something. Then he was the guy, right? Because he's got the car. And even when I went to university, hang out with all the fobs and that kind of stuff. And this is where we're getting into like the initial D type of thing, right? When I was going to school, I'd hang out with the fobs and say, we talk about, being, not exactly rich, right? We thought, oh, I'd really love to get one of those skylines or whatever those type. But I could save up enough money and I could get one of those, and it seemed possible, right? I mean, sure, maybe if I didn't spend so much money on anime, I probably could have got one. But but I wasn't a big car buff, right? But here these guys are, and they're in my, in my calculus class and in my, my physics class and that kind of stuff. And yeah, they would give a crap. They don't give freaking hell. I mean, half the time half the time they had to show up for class because you can fail the class by not attending, right? So they're just there. They don't have they're not taking notes. They're not like doing like dick anything, right? Half the time they got the headphones on. They're just sitting in the back of the class, whatever. And but because they don't care, right? They're there because they're international students. They have to go to school because they're international students, and that's what part of their part of the thing for the passport is. I mean, the parents are paying for it. So what if they pass this course or don't pass this course or whatever? They can always take it. A lot of the material they sort of already knew because their education system was ahead of ours anyway. So I'm sure in Calculus 100 they already knew all the the crap anyway from their their school in Hong Kong, right? But so they're just there to socialize, make friends, enjoy the nightlife and that kind of stuff. And again, I can see myself, befriending these people for their connections to anime, hang out with them. I mean, just said it was a different kind of culture, different kind of world, right? Because I said, I'm just used to wearing, t-shirt and casual pants, but hang out with these guys, it's got to be, dress shirt, it's got to be, nicely shaven, cologne, and this aura of because they're gonna end up wanting to take and go to these expensive places on Robinson Street for ice cream or whatever coffee, expensive coffees and someone not, because again Starbucks isn't gonna cut it, McDonald's isn't gonna cut it, right? They're gonna go for these places that is $10 for a cappuccino and like $10 for a little wedge of cheesecake or something like that. So like even more expensive than the Cheesecake Factory, even more expensive than the most expensive thing that Starbucks has. These are the places that these guys are going to, right? So so when they do things like this in Initial D, I can find it highly, highly relatable to events that happened in my past, and then that's what Vince is sort of going through, and that's probably why it has such a prolific sort of influence on us.
No, I totally agree. It's actually like it's funny. Like I haven't been back to Japan in a while, but like all those locations in Initial D, they're like real locations in Japan. So like I hope that the next time I do visit, I do have the opportunity to visit these like places because I do want to see it. Like there's always on the internet you can see like side by side of the artwork and of the real life thing, and they still like all these places still exist. So yeah, like it's just that like the story of this and knowing that these are real places and the plausibility of it's within like reason, it's like, well, maybe there could be like a genius like school kid who was like driving and delivering like tofu because like the actual mountain pass existed in real life and everything.
I hope you had kind of fun and a little blast from the past. And don't forget, I'll be doing more kind of episodes where I bring out some pictures and more merchandise and collectible stuff from that past era. Okay, so Until next time, see you again.